What's up, guys? Welcome back for another round of Linux web development. Today we're going to be covering arrays. Arrays are basically like a nice container you can put multiple variables in, and you'll see how handy they are right now. Let's go! Alright, first open up Visual Studio Code. The usual, come on guys. Oh look, I already got it open. You're going to make a new file. Once I delete this file, we're going to go ahead and make a new file. You can call it whatever you want. In this case, we're just gonna call it, I'm gonna call it arrays JS. No, that's silly. Call it arrays testing. Because basically I'm gonna be doing the tinkering today and you're gonna be doing the observing. But alright, so I'm gonna paste in this code snippet and I'll explain it to you guys. Don't freak out. It's just a little piece of code. So console.clear, I'm running this every time I run the script in Node, so that way it clears out my console and all the nice results are right here at the top. I've got an array here of five numbers. I have that same array, but this one is called my array returned, and it's the return value of the array. This is the one that we're going to be modifying, and I'll explain this in a second. And then we just have a console log of the original array right here, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here. And we also have another console.log of my array returned. And the reason we're doing it like that is because sometimes when you're working with arrays, sometimes a function will directly impact the array, and sometimes it returns a value. And that's going to get caught by the returned. So we're going to print out both of them to see how each method interacts with each array. Alright guys, this one's going to be kind of big. There's a lot of arrays, so we're just going to have to get right into it, okay? First, I just want to start off by reiterating over indexing. And I just wanted to keep in mind, so let's say we got this array, right? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if we got 5 or an array of 5 elements, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is always going to be index 0, right? Always going to be index 0. And this one will be 4. The reason it's index 4 is because it starts at 0 and it counts up from there. The length of this, the dot length of this is going to be 5 because there's 5 elements. However, it's always going to be an index 0, but a length of 5. Just keep that in mind as we're going through this, because if you have a multiple matrix array, what did I just say? A multiple matrix array? What is that, guys? So a multiple matrix array, it kind of looks like this. You have an array, but inside of the array, you have more arrays. And they're going to be separated by a comma. You might even have like an object in there. And we'll do objects in the next video. But for right now, I just want you to know that that's an object when it's indicated by the curly braces. But so you could have an array, and this will be index 0, and then inside of this you could have index 0, okay, 0, 0, 0, 1, and so on. And then over here you might have index. So hold on, hold on, guys, before this gets out of hand. So this one is going to be index 0 because it's the first element in this array. And then this is going to close right here. And this will be the first element. So if there's another object in here, it'll be 1, 0. And then we'll have 1, 1, and 1, 2. Just like in the basic array. This is a multiple matrix. It might actually be easier for me to actually do this on the screen. So what I'm trying to explain to you is if you could have an array as such. And in that array, you could have multiple arrays like such. But the catch here is that you could have an array like so, and then you could have more arrays in there. And it's not very common to work with super deep data types like this, other than an object orientation. But you should know that they do exist. And if you're ever manipulating a DOM and you're transverse the DOM you can get into something kind of like this where there's a collection, and then if you go up a layer, there's another collection that has all the child elements below that. Which is why it's called a DOM tree, because you go up a branch and then you have more branches below that branch. But okay, so this would be index 0, and then this would be index 0, 0, but this would be index 0, 1, and then so on and so forth. So in the next element um you might have something that looks kind of like this. If I can get my drawing thing back up here. I'll clear that, open up my text, and you might have something where you're like my array, and you might have index 0, index 1, and what that means is the first element and the second one within that. But if that's a little confusing, the more you work with them, the easier that'll become to understand anyways. But alright, so we got a lot of functions to cover, and I'm just gonna jump right into that. So here we go. Alright, so first up, we're gonna have a sip of coffee is what we're gonna have. First up, we're gonna have the length. So what happens when you call length on this? Does this affect this? No, it shouldn't. This should actually, the return value should be the actual length, and we'll see that here. And check out my cool print. So we're gonna do we're actually gonna just run Nodemon today, I think. So if you're interested in Nodemon, it's npm. Actually, you're gonna have to use sudo to install it, npm, and it's gonna be global, because you don't want to install Nodemon into your local npm package. You want that to be something that's computer wide. But Nodemon, basically what it is, it's kind of like a watcher for Node, where it watches your file for any changes, and if it ever changes, it'll refresh, it'll rerun. So I'm gonna just use Nodemon to make things simple today. And instead of running Node, I'm just gonna run Nodemon, and then my arrays testing. And so, okay, so Nodemon's now running, and it's just waiting for the file to change. And you'll see what I'm talking about. But look real quick. So here's the, there you go. So here's the return value, which is the length. So there's 5 elements in that array. And you'll see how it didn't modify it, but it did return a value. So really quick, before I get any further in there, I'm just going to erase length, and you're going to see how this is just going to change when I save. And see how it automatically refreshed. That's because Nodemon is watching that file. So if you want to get that, it's you're going to want to use sudo privileges npm-g and Nodemon, just like I had written. But alright guys, so let's get into the next one, right? So after we got length, we got indexing, like I was explaining, right? Just like strings, you can index each element individually. Something to note here is, say this was a string, you could access that element at the 0th index, and then you can access each letter within that. So if I wanted to access just the T in string, it would be the 0th element, because it's the first thing within this array, and then T will be the first element within there, so it would look just like this. And if I print this out, you should see it right there where it's a T. Okay, moving on. That's the basics, the gist of indexing. So I'm going to move on from there. So we're going to cover loops, not necessarily loops. Actually, you know what? Yeah, let's run it real quick. So let me explain this to you real quick. So we're going to do a simple for loop, and this is kind of like your basic loop. Don't worry about this error down here, guys. It's just because my thing auto saves, and so it's picking up an error. It's like, whoa, I don't know what to do with this. Obviously there's no data there, so there's nothing for it to do with that. We're not going to worry too much about it. Once I write a valid code in there, it'll refresh and print it out. But so what I want you to see here is that gosh, do I even remember? We're gonna let I equal 0, and then we're gonna have the condition. So if I is less than my array dot length, and then we're gonna have I plus plus. So to break this down a little bit, basically we're declaring a variable. This could be var. This is the equivalent of var. It's just ES6 version, and it keeps it clean. But so what you need to know for this is basically we're creating a variable that starts at 0. That's the beginning of I. And then each time I goes through this for loop, I is going to increase itself because of this rule right here. So it's going to be I plus plus. And then right here we have I less than my, oops, what the, my I less than the length of R. So if I becomes greater than this length, actually I think it has to be -1, because if I is 5, then it'll be greater than the length, right? So what you could do -1, or you could say greater than or equal to the length. But in this case, this for loop will stop running. And then you go ahead and open up a squiggly brace. What do they call it in math, guys? Curly brace. And I don't know why we call them curly braces in code. But all right, so open that up. And so what we're going to do now is we're just going to console.log, and we're going to console log my array at the position of I. And you'll see where it goes through and it prints out the first element, the second, third, fourth, fifth, all individually. And then it returned undefined for some reason. I'm not sure why it did that, but it did that. What if we console log I as well? So now you'll see where that's why, because it actually for some reason went up to 5 and it ran without. There we go. I know it's kind of messy, but basically it's kind of messy, huh? But basically, so it ran the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth elements. And then there's the 2 default prints-outs that we're doing down here. But so this is the basics of the for loop. And what you need to know is that each time we go through a loop, gosh, okay, guy, here, you ready for this? We got, that's ridiculous. So we've got each element within that array. So each time we go through the I, we increase the I parameter, it increases by 1. So at first it's 0, and then it goes up to 1 because of this rule right here, I plus plus. Each time we finish, it goes up to, so the next one would be 2, and the next one would be 3, and the next one would be 4, and so on and so forth, until it meets that condition right here. I less than or equal to my array dot length -1, so 4. If it becomes equal to or greater than 4, then that runs and then it stops. So this is the gist of a loop. It gets one number each time, and it increases and increases and increases until a specific condition is met, and then it stops running. So why is this important, you're asking me? Well, other than keeping it dry, array.map. Well, we'll do for each first, and let me explain this to you. So a for each is basically it's like an array loop. It's like a loop built into an array, and each time it goes through, it grabs it gets one element, and it also will grab an index. And the index isn't as important, but I do want you to know that it is there. I don't know why I put an extra parenthesis there, but so if you look, it's kind of similar, but look, I'm using ES6 functionality here. You could put function here and open it up that way. I just never do that, and it's not my style. But so you're gonna have an element, so the first element is going to be string, and then the second element is going to be 2, and then the third element is going to be 3, and so on. So if we actually if we console log, and I'm going to use a string literal here, and we'll just say elm is elm, and the index is index. You'll see here, so it goes through, it grabs each element, and then it grabs that index. It starts at 0, and I'm pretty sure that that's the standard. I don't think you can change that index number, but you might be able to. Anyways, so each time it goes through this loop, it grabs an element. So I want you to note the for each we're gonna go over map next, but the difference between for each and map returns a value that'll get caught by this array here. It actually creates its own, it creates another array from its function, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we run it. But what you should know about this is that the for each function doesn't return anything, and it doesn't modify the original string. It just runs a certain code that's given here by you a certain amount of times, which would be the however many elements is in that array. It doesn't return anything, and it doesn't modify this. It just does something for each element in this array. Now, that being said, if I say element plus 1, and I change this to actual parentheses and not return parentheses, you see how it didn't return anything? It returned null. Actually, it didn't return null, it just returned undefined. So basically, it's saying that this right here, it didn't return anything. I told it specifically to return the when you put your set of functions within a set of parentheses, it's telling it to be explicit return. So whatever happens in here will get explicitly returned to this value. However, the for each is not designed to return anything. So now we're going to go ahead and drop the map in there. And what happens when you have a map, and it's going to be the same arguments, the same parameters here, and we're going to modify the element each time. And look down here. Actually, let me change this back to an integer real quick. Okay, so now look at this. The returned array contains each element in the original array plus 1. And to prove it, look, check this out, guys. We'll just multiply it by 5. So you're going to see 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, right? So the returned array is actually the original array, but then this is what happened to it right here. I told it specifically to multiply each element by 5. And then each time it goes through, it returns and creates a new array. So you got that right there. Oh, sorry, that was a lot. All right, let's get it. So just keep rolling, guys. Keep up the energy. So if an array is basically a list of items, and we can map through them, and we can go through each one and do something with each element, what else can we do? There's so much. There's like 20 things here I've got to cover, and that's just scratching the surface. All right, so now we're gonna go in. We're gonna do the we're gonna take this off for a second here, and instead of doing myArray.map, we're gonna do index of. And what happens here is you give it an integer. Well, you know what? Let's just give it hello, and we're gonna modify one of our values up here to be hello. Look, right now it couldn't find it, so it returned -1. But what happens if it could find hello? Okay, there you go. So hello is actually at the index of 2 in this array. So it's 0, 1, 2, and there it is, right? So if you had a long array and you wanted to find the index of something, you could do it by doing that. And like, what happens if maybe there's 2 hellos in there? Well, it finds the first one and then returns that value to you. And this is important, and we'll cover this when we start to splice things out of arrays. But for now, that's there. So okay, you could say index. Well, what if we wanted to check index 2, right? Does that work? No, it doesn't work. All right, don't do that. We got index of. We got. I know you can do find. Find is another callback function where you have a value each time it goes through and it tries to find a value. And this is another explicit return type function where you want to give it a set of rules, basically. So if the value equals hello, and then look, it'll return, it returned it, it found it. It's like, oh, okay, it's right there. You can also find the index of, yeah, you can do find index, and that, so the index is 2, but going back to the find, this will return the first value that meets the criteria. So if we change these back to numbers really quick here, and these numbers don't have to be ordered, guys, but I just find it more convenient to have them sorted. Speaking of being sorted, I think you can yeah, you see how it sorted that? You see how it has 2 and then it has 20, but it's saying that 20 is less than 3, so it put it in between. That's because the 2 and the 2 match, but then there's another integer after that, so it's lining up the first values, but I'm not covering sort today. I didn't think about that. Probably have to remove that actually. But okay, so it finds the first value. So this finds the first value of that meets the criteria. So if I change this to the first thing that's greater than 3, for example, you'll see where there it goes. The first value that's greater than 3 is 4, so return that number of 4. And you can also find index. And so the index would be at position 3. And then if you flip this, for example, the first value that's less than 3 is obviously going to be the index 0. It's going to be 1. So what you need to know about this is that this returns the very first value. And now to get a little bit more detailed, there's something called filter. There's a method called filter for arrays. And what filter does is it basically does that find, but it does the entire array. So check this out, guys. So now we have 1 and 2. So I'll return both of these first two values, and then I return nothing after 3 because 3 is not greater than 3, and then you have 4 and 20, which both are not, they don't fit that criteria. So it just filtered all of those out and returned it to this new array. It's important to note here that the original array did not get modified, but the returned array did. So if you don't have something to catch your filter, you're not going to get anything out of it. But okay, so moving on past that really quick, I wanted to get into splicing. You might be interested in this because splicing actually directly modifies the original array. So we're going to call it .splice on here, and you're going to give it an index. And so if you wanted to, you could either predefine, like if you wanted to find something within the array, like say you wanted to filter out anything that wasn't 2. Let me run this really quick. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Splice index, or we'll even say remove, the removal index, and we're gonna set that equal to my array dot find, and we're gonna find the index of 2. Oops, what did I do wrong? It's not a function. I know 2 is not a function. We're going to find the index of a value that equals 2. Or value equals 2. Oh, I know what's going on here, guys. This is working. This is working, but it's not nothing's being printed out because I'm not returning that value, guys. It's okay, so it's returning the first value that's greater than 2. So it's returning the value of 3 basically. So it's returning 0, 1. It's returning the second index here. So remove index is now equal to 2. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to splice out the index of 2. I'm going to start it, I'm going to stop it at that same exact index. It's acting different than it does on strings, but so I'm guessing that, look right here where it shows this start number delete count. So basically it's not saying the end index, it's saying how far do you want to cut it out. So from the second index, how far do you want to go? If I say 1, then it's okay, we'll just cut out just that 1. But if you give it 2, then that's why, because it's stepping to that second step. And then if I give it a 3, it'll step 3 more. So now it's just 1 and 2, and the last 3 are cut out. And if you just say splice at position 2, it cuts everything from 2 out. As you can see, the returned array is everything from 2 out, and then you have just 0 and 1, the first two indexing. So, sorry about the confusion there. I don't know what happened. I guess the splice method handles a little differently than the string splice, but nonetheless, what you need to know is that if you look, it directly modifies the original array right there. Directly modifies the original array, and it also happens to return everything you sliced off. And so this is actually important because we're gonna get into pop, push, shift, and unshift now. And what you need to know about pop, push, shift, unshift. Check this out, guys. So I'm just gonna do a little dummy one right here. 1, 2, 3. So now that we got that on the screen here, we're gonna go and move over here. So okay, so check it out. So we can pop this last number out. We can pop it. We can push into the front. You can either push into the front, pop out the last one. You can unshift, or you can shift out the first index, or you can unshift into the front of the array. And I know it sounds like a lot going on, but I'm going to label these now for you. So this is going to be push in. It's going to be pop out. This one's going to be shift out. And this one's going to be unshift in. And I don't know what. I think that these are backwards, honestly. Because when I think of shift, unshift, I'm thinking about like a car. You want to shift into gear, not out of gear, but for whatever reason, it's not like that at all. So you shift out and you unshift in, and then you can push in or you pop out. And I'm going to show you right now in the background here what this is going to be like. But so this is kind of like a nice little diagram you can use. So you can pop out the last one, you can push in here to the front, you can shift out the first number, or you can unshift into the front of the array. Indexing in somewhere in here, like if you wanted to say if you wanted to add something to the second position here, or to the third position, it gets a little harder than push, pop, shift, unshift. But these are the go-to methods for modifying your array. So if I say pop, it's going to pop out that 20. The return value will actually be the 20, but it's going to remove that. If I push and then I push in, say, 30, you'll see now where the new array has 30, and it actually returned the length of the new array, which is 6. That's what that number is. It's the length of the new array. You can unshift into the front and then return the length. You don't have to catch this. You can just call unshift and you don't have to have anything to catch it, because it will just push it in there. Because it's not creating a new array, it's modifying the original. Or you can shift out the first number there, so it lost a 1 and it caught that 1 down here in there. So I hope that made a little sense. Hopefully that diagram was not too bad. We got the reduce method, which is really cool. So we're gonna do a reduce, which is another one of those explicit returns. The reduce method can get kind of hairy when you're first looking at it. It can be really kind of odd. You might want to come back and refer to this at some point, or maybe take a note of this. But so it's called the reduce. And so what the reduce method is designed to do is it goes through each element like for each or map. But instead of modifying it, what the reduce method does is it's supposed to grab each number and add up, or whatever you're passing to. It doesn't necessarily have to be integers. Like for example, you could concatenate a bunch of strings together, but in this case we're going to add all these numbers together. So let me show you. It's going to have an accumulator, which if you think of an accumulator, I like to think of an accumulator kind of like a balloon. It's an empty bag. You fill it with air, and the more air you put in it, the more it holds, right? Until you open up the hole and it lets all the air out. This is the same way with our integers, with our integer accumulator. Our accumulator starts empty, and then it's going to have the value, or the number. And what we're gonna tell it to do is we're gonna take the accumulator and we're gonna add it to each number, and that will return all of these numbers added together. So if you were to add all of this plus 20, you're gonna get 30. And something to note here is if you wanted to not start the accumulator at 0, you have to put it right here at the very, very end after your return function. So you would give it comma and then some numbers. So you could say like 10 more and it'll return 40. It starts at 10 now instead of starting at 0. And I don't know why that goes there. I feel like it should honestly go like here, like maybe like start num, but it does not go there. It goes right here. Took me a second to find that, so you might want to take note of that. The reduce method is pretty handy when you're adding, say, like a subtotal of products together. So there's your reduce, which is like I said, it has its purpose. It's a very handy little function that they built in there. All right, I think that's pretty much it for modifying arrays. Now I want to cover really quick. We're going to erase all of this. And I just want to cover this really quick. So you can create a new array by doing just the square brackets. You can also create an array from an array, and then if you give it the parentheses and you give it, say, a number, say you want 6 empty elements, then now it'll have 6 empty items, and it doesn't display them like traditionally, but there's a method called fill, and you can fill it with whatever value you want, and you'll see where now it has that value. Don't forget, you can also like take a string and you can split it, and this will return a new array of string. Each element will be a letter because I'm not giving it a space, but that's string modification. And if you're more interested in string modifying, you can go check out my last video. But okay, so so you can give it however many numbers you want, right? Gave it 10, you can give it 100, whatever. You can make a big old array just by throwing in a number there. If you're interested in knowing the type of something, you can say type of, no capitalizing in there, type of, and like it prints out object. I don't know why it didn't print out array, but it prints out an object. If you want to know if something is specifically, like if you were testing conditionally if something was an array, you could say array.isArray, and that will return a true or false value depending on whether or not this is an array. For example, if I throw a number in there, it'll return false because it's obviously not an array. You can make an array from, which takes an iterable or an array like object, for example. So instead of using a split, for example, you could call array from string and it will return the same thing, basically. But it creates a new array from some iterable. It doesn't necessarily have to be a string. It could be another list. It could be an object. I think I might not be able to be an object actually. So objects have key value pairs, and I'm just gonna give it a test key value pair. Yeah, okay, so that didn't return anything, obviously, because it can't interpret that, but that's that. Okay, so array from, array. Oh, okay. So the array of method returns a new array, and you can give it however x amount of arguments, and it's gonna encapsulate those into a new array. You got the includes. Includes is really handy too. We should probably check that one out really quick because it's another good thing to have for conditionals. So for example, if you had say you had a paragraph, you split it into into a string or whatever, you could maybe you want to test if it has the word of or in it, or you wanted to test, say for example you have a list of data and you wanted to make sure that they specifically added a specific thing in there or not. You could say array dot no, not array, what the heck, you want to say new array dot includes, and you want to see if it includes number one. It's obviously going to contain number one. See that? I return true. So it's saying that this value is within this array. And that's a really handy function to know. That's pretty much it. That's the gist of it, guys. So if you wanted to get that code right here again, it's right here. Basically, I was just clearing the console so that everything stays nice up here at the top. I got this. I got a preset array. I've got the array that I wanted to modify, setting to a return value to see if it would return something. And then I was logging the original and also logging the returned array. This \n is a string escape character. So I'm telling it, basically this \n is just saying, hey, print out a space, a new line. And that's why this and this string is spaced out right here. Alright guys, now you know how to manipulate arrays. Go ahead and practice those a couple times. Get fancy with them. Maybe try to combine them with your skills of strings. Run a couple different tests of your own. Don't forget, I mean, tinker with it, man. Learn, because the more you mess with this stuff, the more you're able to pattern recognize. And if you need help, I do recommend going to Google and just looking up a question: how to split an array, what is the filter method, how does the filter method work, how does splice work. You know, go to Google, and a lot of the times W2 Schools is pretty good, or W3 Schools. MDN, Mozilla Development Network, is also a really good resource for this kind of stuff. And if you're interested and you do need help, I do recommend checking that first. I do recommend that because most of the time you can find your answers there. It is also worth noting to remember that when you're working with arrays and arrow functions, if you're using the squiggly braces, right, that's always going to be a conditional statement. It's going to expect probably like a true or false value to return from that. It also does mean to do a specific set of commands, like in your fetch. If you're familiar with that yet, I don't know, but if you're familiar with, like, for example, like the fetch command, the payload usually goes within like a set of, like, an object, and it returns a set of commands to that. But specifically when you're working with map functions and whatnot, you might have to alternate between using those brackets and using the parentheses, because it does make a difference. And it took me a while to figure that out. I kept hitting errors after errors, and I sat there forever trying to debug it, but I finally figured out that if you got to pay attention to those. They're very important. But alright guys, so anyhow, we're gonna cover probably objects in the next one. I know I kind of skimped over numbers. Numbers are pretty straightforward. You can have decimals. I don't think they call them floating point numbers in this. I think they're just considered numbers when they have a decimal. But there's an entire module for like math, a math module. You can always look up like the math module, like I was saying, on the MDN, and there's a lot of really good examples there. There's a lot of functionality that's built into the math module or math library, and you don't even have to import it. It's already built into JS. But alright guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.